Chapter 21, A Quiet Tension. Hannah sat in her room, nervously tapping her pen against the desk. The silence of the evening was thick around her, but the weight of unspoken thoughts filled the space between her and the paper. She had been writing, or rather, trying to write, but the words felt different tonight. For once, she wasn't sure what she wanted to say. It had been a week since she'd last heard from him. No letter on the radio, no message to calm her racing thoughts. The absence gnawed at her, though she tried to tell herself it didn't matter. Her phone sat quietly beside her notebook, unbothered by her growing impatience. As much as she tried to focus on the letter, she couldn't help but feel like there was something she was missing. The letter she had sent last time was one she had poured her heart into, not expecting a reply but still hoping that he, wherever he was, might feel the same. She rubbed her eyes, pushing away the tiredness that threatened to settle in her. No, she had promised herself this wasn't about waiting or depending on another person. She was doing this for herself. For the catharsis of writing, the release of thoughts she couldn't otherwise share. Just as she turned her attention back to the blank page, the phone buzzed. She froze. Picking it up with trembling fingers, she saw a notification from the radio station's app. The most recent episode of Voices Between the Lines. Her heart skipped a beat. She tapped it open, the familiar voice of Chris Connor spilling into her ears. The whole episode, she listened carefully, but there was no letter for her. Hannah's breath caught in her throat. That was it, maybe he had stopped. Hannah's heart sank as Chris's voice continued to fill the room, but no letter followed. Her mind raced, thinking back to the letter she had sent. Did he not listen the episode? Was he really not going to write back? Her fingers gripped the edge of the desk as she stared at the screen, her pulse quickening. She replayed the episode again, certain she had missed something, but no, there was nothing. Just the usual show, the usual flow, and Chris's friendly voice, speaking to the anonymous listeners who shared their thoughts. It felt like a punch to the gut. She had written so much, trusted in the anonymity, the space between words. But now it felt like she had been speaking into a void. The silence in the room pressed down harder on her. Had he lost interest? Was he too busy? Or had her words simply not mattered anymore for him to respond? Her phone buzzed again, pulling her out of the spiral. This time, it was a text. Mom, hey sweetie, hope you're doing okay. Call me when you can. She sighed, rubbing her temples. Her mother's voice was always filled with care, but it felt like an echo of the same concern she had been receiving for months. She wasn't sure if she could answer that question today. Was she okay? Hannah glanced at the clock. It was late, and she had been sitting there for hours, letting thoughts bounce off the walls in her mind. She needed a break, something to pull her away from the empty pages and her own spiraling thoughts. Her fingers hovered over the screen of her phone, but she didn't text back. Instead, she closed the app and slid the phone aside. She glanced at the half-finished letter, her pen still in hand. Maybe the silence meant something. After all, he was just a stranger passing by. Maybe it was a reminder that some things were just meant to remain quiet. After all, wasn't that what writing was all about? Taking the words you didn't say and letting them breathe on their own. With a soft exhale, she began to write again. Dear you, sometimes, silence is louder than anything else. It's the space where words linger before they're even spoken. And I find myself here again, waiting to see if they'll come. I thought maybe I'd stopped. But even in the silence, I'll keep writing. Because maybe, one day, when the words finally do come, they'll be the ones we were meant to say all along. She stared at the page for a long moment, then folded it carefully. The knot in her chest hadn't loosened, but she felt a little lighter. She wasn't waiting for a reply anymore. She was just writing. For herself. And for whatever might come after. Meanwhile, backstage at a commercial shoot, Jackson sat half-dressed in a sleek designer blazer, his stylist fussing over his hair. He barely registered her muttering as he scrolled his phone one-handed, earbuds tucked in under his messy fringe. Chris's voice came through clearly. He replayed every letter he had recorded in his phone. The letter ended, but the echo remained. He didn't move, didn't speak. Jackson, the stylist asked, which startled him. He blinked once. Slowly. Yeah, he murmured. All good, he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. But it wasn't. Not really. His heart was hammering. It felt like he was losing something. Or someone. And for the first time, Jackson wasn't sure if he had the courage to step out from behind the mask, not the stage one, not the media one, the one that said he was Jackson Walker, public property, untouchable idol. She'd met him through words. Could she accept the rest? He reached for his notebook again, flipping to the page where his last letter had ended. His fingers hesitated for a second. Then, he wrote. To the one who isn't afraid to be anymore. I've hidden most of my life behind songs, smiles, and silence. But lately, your words make me feel like, maybe I don't want to hide forever. Not from you. I don't know how this ends. I don't even know if you'd still write if you knew who I was. But I want to try. So if we stop pretending, if we take off the masks, I'll be there, waiting. Yours, still stranger, but getting braver. He stared at it, read it twice, then folded it neatly and slipped it into the center of the notebook. He'd give it to Chris later, or maybe not. Maybe. If he didn't lose his nerve first. Chapter 22, Echoes Between the Lines. Jackson sat on the floor of his darkened living room, back against the couch, his phone resting face down beside him. The apartment was silent, save for the occasional hum of traffic outside and the quiet tick of the wall clock. He had listened to the latest episode of Voices Between the Lines twice. There was no letter from her. The absence shouldn't have mattered. She was just a stranger. A voice on paper. A name she hadn't even given. But it did matter. He stared at his open notebook, filled with half-finished thoughts, crossed-out paragraphs, and one line he'd written over and over again. Did she stop writing, or did they stop reading her? He hated not knowing. He hadn't sent a letter in a while. Maybe she thought he gave up. Maybe she thought it wasn't real for him. But it was. Too real. Jackson ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. His manager had called earlier, 3 missed meetings and a postponed shoot. He had been slipping lately. Not on stage, not in front of cameras, but everywhere else. Because when the lights went off and the fans stopped cheering, he was just Jackson. A man sitting alone with a letter that he never sent. He opened his notes app. Tapped out a line. Deleted it. Then another. Finally, he grabbed a pen and wrote in his notebook. To the girl who might have stopped writing. If silence was meant to protect us, why does it ache more than words ever did? I don't know why your letter didn't come this time. But I miss it. I miss you, whoever you are. Your words made my world feel smaller in a good way. Safer. Less hollow. I'm not asking for answers. I just hope you're okay. And if you're still listening, I haven't stopped. Not really. He closed the notebook slowly, resting his head back against the couch. Somewhere out there, maybe she was still writing too. Or maybe, like him, she was just waiting for the silence to speak back. Chapter 23, The Show Must Go On. Jackson stood behind the thick curtain of the stage, the noise of the crowd thundering just beyond. The sound technician adjusted the mic on his collar while the assistant director counted down the seconds. 3, 2, 1. Lights up. He stepped into the spotlight, greeted by screams, camera flashes, and a wave of energy that hit like a tidal force. His smile was automatic, perfect, trained. Every move choreographed, every lyric polished. But inside, he felt like he was moving through water. That familiar emptiness had returned. The kind that applause couldn't fill. The kind only one anonymous voice on the radio had somehow eased. After the performance, Jackson returned backstage, sweat clinging to his neck and adrenaline wearing off fast. He gave high fives, posed for behind-the-scenes shots, and nodded through praise he barely heard. In his dressing room, the quiet returned. He peeled off his jacket and sank into the couch. His manager knocked once before entering. "Great job out there," he said, setting a water bottle beside him. "You okay?" "Just tired. You've been saying that a lot lately." He didn't respond. "Look, I'm not trying to pry," he said gently, "but if something's bothering you, maybe talking would help. We can even reduce your schedule for a while." "No," Jackson said quickly. "Please don't." His voice sounded too sharp, even to his own ears. He sighed. "I'm fine. Really." He nodded, clearly unconvinced but wise enough not to push further. All right, let me know if that changes. When he left, Jackson leaned back, staring at the ceiling. He pulled out his phone and opened the Voices Between the Lines app. The next episode would be out in a few days. He didn't know if she would write again. But he'd wait. And in the meantime, he'd keep performing, keep smiling, keep pretending because that was the job. But when the curtain fell, when the cheers faded, it wasn't the fame he missed. It was her. Chapter 24, Unsent Letters. The night was quiet, but Jackson's mind wasn't. He sat in his dim apartment, away from the glitter and the chaos. No stage lights, no screaming fans, just the soft hum of the city outside and the faint ticking of the wall clock. His notebook lay open in front of him. Pages of scribbled thoughts, half-written sentences, crossed-out feelings. He tapped the pen against his knee, debating whether to write again. He hadn't heard her letter last week. Had she stopped writing? Or had someone decided it wasn't worth airing? Because he stopped writing. He hated how much it affected him, this invisible tether to a stranger who didn't know his name. But somehow, her words had become the only part of his life that felt real. He picked up the pen. To the girl whose letters I wait for more than sleep. I don't know if you're still out there. Maybe you stopped writing. Maybe they just didn't read your words this time. But I heard the silence. And it was louder than anything I've faced on stage. If you're still there, I hope you're okay. I hope you know you matter. And I hope one day, I can thank you for reminding me who I am beneath the mask. He didn't sign it. He never did. He closed the notebook, resting his hand over the cover. And for the first time in days, he exhaled a little slower, like writing to her, even if she never read it, made the weight a bit lighter. Chapter 25, Silence Speaks Louder. The late-night breeze slipped through her open window, rustling the edges of the papers scattered across Hannah's desk. She lay curled up on the edge of her bed, staring at the ceiling, her thoughts racing far faster than the second-hand ticking on her wall clock. There had been no letter. Again, she tried to reason with herself. People got busy, maybe he was traveling, maybe he didn't feel like writing. But the ache in her chest refused to be soothed by logic. It wasn't about the letter itself. It was the connection, the invisible thread tying her quiet little world to someone else's heartbeat. And now, that thread felt frayed. Her tea had gone cold hours ago. She sat up slowly, eyes scanning the desk, and reached for her notebook. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened to a fresh page. Dear you, tonight feels heavy. Not because of anything big or dramatic, just silence. I keep wondering if I said something wrong. Or maybe I asked too much just by hoping you'd write back. But I won't stop writing. Not because I expect a reply, but because you made the silence bearable once. And now, I guess, I'm just trying to return the favor. She pressed her pen gently at the end of the page, letting the ink dot settle. This one, she wouldn't send again. She placed it carefully in a box with the others, her collection of unsent words, waiting for a voice to catch them on the other side. She turned off the light and lay back down. Outside, the wind picked up. Inside, the silence remained, but it felt a little less lonely. Chapter 26, The One-Sided String. It was raining again. Hannah watched the droplets race each other down her window pane, her knees pulled to her chest, chin resting on top. The soft patter outside matched the quiet rhythm in her heart, not loud, not crashing, just steady, persistent. Like the ache that hadn't left in days. She hadn't written today, not for lack of trying. The blank page had stared back at her all morning, as if mocking her for needing someone who might have moved on. It wasn't supposed to feel like this. He didn't promise her anything. No name, no face, no forever. Just words. And yet, somehow, they'd mattered. Enough that she now sat there, missing a stranger like he'd been part of her every day. Her fingers reached for the notebook again, more out of habit than hope. But this time, she didn't begin with, Dear you. Instead, she wrote, I thought I could be okay with this being one-sided. That writing to someone unknown could be enough. But I miss you more than I expected. I don't even know your name, and yet, here I am. Tethered to a silence that once felt safe, and now feels a little cruel. Maybe I'm foolish. Maybe you're just a voice I imagined into something more. But if you're still out there, I hope you know I kept every word. And I meant all of mine. She didn't cry. Not this time. Instead, she folded the page, slipped it into the envelope, and left it unsealed on the windowsill. Let the rain whisper to it tonight. And maybe, just maybe, the wind would carry it to him. Chapter 27. Through the rusted mailbox. The rain had stopped by morning, leaving behind the earthy scent of wet pavement and a sky still shy with clouds. Hannah stepped outside with her jacket loosely draped over her shoulders, the sealed envelope in her hand now slightly wrinkled from the night spent on the windowsill. She had no plan, no destination in mind. Just a pull. Down the block from her building was an old, rusted mailbox tucked between a vintage bookstore and an abandoned laundromat. She'd passed it for years, never giving it more than a glance. But today, it felt like it had been waiting. She hesitated in front of it. No stamp, no address, no return label. Just a folded hope in paper form. With a deep breath, Hannah slid the letter into the box. No expectations, only the act of letting go. That same morning, Jackson stood in front of the mirror in his private lounge, fingers twitching restlessly against his wrist. He hadn't slept. Not really. The studio was quiet, they weren't rolling yet. His team had stepped out for coffee, leaving him a rare pocket of solitude. He opened his notebook again, skimming through every letter he'd written but never sent. Some were too raw, some were too honest, but all of them, every page, were his truth. And still, he hadn't sent a single one. He pulled out a blank sheet. This time, there was no hesitation. To the one I haven't met, not really. I saw a mailbox today on my drive. Old, faded, like it hadn't been touched in years. And suddenly, I thought of you. Not your face, I still don't know that. But your voice that I heard in your words. Your weight on the pages. It made me wonder what would happen if I wrote something, and actually let it go. So here it is. I don't know if this will reach you. I don't even know if you're still writing. But I am. Still writing. Still hoping. Even if it's foolish. Still stranger. He folded the paper, placed it in an envelope, and without another second of doubt, stepped out of the lounge and into the gray-streaked morning. Jackson Walker, national heartthrob and global icon, pulled his hoodie over his head and walked 3 blocks past the cafe crowd, away from the cameras and chaos. When he found the mailbox, the same one Hannah had stood before just hours earlier, he paused. The metal was rusted. But it felt like fate. He had never used a mailbox for his letter before, but when he saw it this morning, he couldn't help but write his heart down. He slid the envelope in. Let the words find their way. Chapter 28. Letters in the same box. The mailbox at the edge of 5th and Langston hadn't seen so much use in years. Rust curled at its seams, its paint faded into a dull, weathered blue. But today, it held something fragile and honest, 2 envelopes, placed just hours apart, neither addressed nor signed, and yet somehow destined to sit side by side. That afternoon, Chris Connor unlocked the back of the box with a practiced flick of his wrist. It was part of his weekly routine now, an extra mailbox set up quietly near the station for voices between the lines, listeners who wanted to send something physical. Anonymous words somehow felt weightier when written by hand. He flipped through the pile of random fan mail and promotional flyers until 2 envelopes caught his attention, plain, unstamped, no names, but thick with something heavier than just ink. He paused, sensing something unspoken as he turned them over. Chris had always trusted his instincts, and right now, they hummed. Back at the recording booth, he set both envelopes beside him. The lights dimmed to their usual moody hue, the mic blinked to life, and the music played low in the background. He cleared his throat. Tonight's letters, he began, come from somewhere in between silence and serendipity. He opened the first one, Hannah's. Her words were soft, longing, honest. I thought I could be okay with this being one-sided, but I miss you more than I expected. As Chris read her words aloud, Jackson sat in his car in the station parking lot, earbuds in, hoodie up, heart beating faster with every sentence. He knew that voice, knew those words. His fingers curled around the steering wheel. She hadn't stopped writing. She still cared. He closed his eyes for a moment, just long enough to breathe. And then Chris began reading the second letter, his. I saw a mailbox today on my drive. Old, faded, like it hadn't been touched in years. And suddenly, I thought of you. Hannah froze in her room, her pen slipping from her hand as the letter echoed through her speakers. The same mailbox. Her mailbox. No, it couldn't be. But it was. The realization hit her slowly, unfolding in her chest like the bloom of something both terrifying and beautiful. He was still there too. Still writing back to her. Still hoping for her letters. For a moment, neither of them moved. Two people, in two corners of the city, surrounded by walls, by fear, by doubts, but still somehow reaching each other. Not quite touching. Not yet. But closer. So much closer. Chapter 29, almost touching. The world didn't shift. No lightning. No dramatic downpour. No divine soundtrack playing in the background. But something had changed. Hannah sat cross-legged on her bed, radio still playing softly in the background, Chris's voice now replaced by gentle acoustic melodies. Her fingers hovered over her notebook, but she didn't write. She just breathed. He was real. Not just in words, not just in the folds of pages or lines between letters. He had touched the same mailbox. Maybe even on the same day. And he had listened. That was what undid her most. He had listened. Across the city, Jackson hadn't driven away. He was still parked outside the radio station, elbow on the car window, forehead resting against his hand. The second Chris read her words, he had known. Not hoped. Not guessed. Known. Because that ache in her words was one he'd felt too. The way she said she missed him, it reached inside and tugged at every sleepless night he'd filled with unsent drafts and unfinished letters. He pulled out his phone, thumb hovering over a contact he had never used, the studio's anonymous fan submission inbox. But instead of texting, he leaned back and pulled his hoodie tighter. "I'm not ready," he muttered to himself. Not yet. Inside the studio, Chris was staring at the two letters, rereading them now that the broadcast had ended. He wasn't supposed to wonder. But damn if this didn't feel like something more than coincidence. Still, he respected the anonymity of his listeners. It was a sacred thing. Even curiosity had boundaries. But one thing was certain. They weren't just writing letters. They were writing their feeling toward each other. Later that week, Chris held a new envelope, no name, no address, but the handwriting was unmistakably hers. A little slanted, a little soft. And beneath it, another letter, fresher, newer. His. Chris blinked. He didn't believe in fate. But maybe, just maybe, he believed in stories that wrote themselves. And this one, it was still unfolding. Chapter 30, Words in Waiting. The envelope sat on Chris's desk for 2 whole days. He didn't air them immediately. Not because he didn't want to, but because something in his gut told him this wasn't just another pair of poetic strangers with dramatic flair. This was delicate, real, on the verge of something. So he waited. Until Friday night. The show's theme was, missed moments and almosts. Fitting to the situation, wasn't it? The lights in the studio dimmed to a moody orange glow as Chris leaned into the mic, the city's silence humming faintly through the glass. "I wasn't going to read these tonight," he began softly. But sometimes, the words wait for the right moment. He slid the first letter from the envelope, Jackson's, and began to read. Chris adjusted the mic slightly, his voice dropping to that familiar low timbre that made the city pause. "Dear someone, I wonder what it would be like to pass you on the street. Would I know it was you? Would something pull in my chest like a string tied too tight for too long? I think about that more than I should. How strange, to miss someone I've never met. But stranger still is how familiar you feel." Chris paused, eyes flicking over the next lines with a quiet breath before continuing. "Your words don't just sit on paper. They echo. Like you've found the exact hallway inside me where my thoughts live and whispered back everything I didn't know I needed to hear. I don't know who you are. But I think I've been waiting for you long before you ever wrote to me." He folded the page with care, like it was made of something fragile. "He didn't sign this one," Chris murmured. "But maybe that's okay. Maybe some things speak loudest when they remain unnamed." Back in her room, Hannah stared at the ceiling, her eyes prickling. Her hands had gone still in her lap. No scribbles tonight. No pages turned. Just her heartbeat, fluttering like it had heard something it recognized. She didn't need confirmation. Didn't need names or faces. She knew. Whoever he was, he felt it too. And maybe, just maybe, they were both waiting for the same thing. Not a name. Not even a meeting. Just a moment where silence became something more. something that sounded like love in its earliest shape. Chris let the soft music break for a few minutes before reaching for the second envelope. The paper had a gentle bend to it, as if it had been held often, maybe reread before being sent. He opened it carefully. I don't know your name. But I've started dreaming in your words. I hear your voice in the quiet moments, not because I know how it sounds, but because I know how it feels. Chris paused. His eyes scanned ahead, just to steady himself. Then he kept reading. You've become a presence in the absence. A comfort in the unknown. Maybe it's silly. Maybe I'm building a castle out of ink and words and papers. But I think I'd still choose it. Even if it crumbles. Because somewhere between the pages, I found something real. I found you. Chris set the letter down with a soft exhale. The studio was silent, the kind of silence that comes after something sacred. That one, he said quietly, feels like a heartbeat on paper. Meanwhile, Jackson sat in the dark of his parked car, just blocks from the studio. He hadn't moved since the first letter aired. The second, that one undid him. His hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, chest tight with a feeling he couldn't even name. It was not sadness, not joy, something more dangerous. Longing, raw and real. She had written again, not just for the show, but for him. Even if she didn't know who he was, even if he was still just a stranger behind an unsent name, her words had found him. She had found him. His throat ached with the pressure he refused to release. Just then his phone buzzed. It was a message from Chris, simple and casual. To the point. They're not just letters anymore. You're gonna write back. Jackson didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, he leaned his head back against the seat, let the quiet settle over him. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel this silence so lonely. Chapter 31, the one with the name left out. Jackson didn't sleep that night. He tried. But her words kept playing on a loop in his mind, not like a song you hum, but like something unfinished, begging to be answered. At 5:12 a.m., he gave up trying. The city was still half asleep, lights flickering on in scattered apartment windows. He pulled on a hoodie, grabbed his keys, and stepped out before the sun had fully broken through the horizon. But he didn't go to set. He drove to the coast. To think. To breathe. To be just Jackson, not the actor, not the brand, just a man with a heart too full and a mind tangled in every line she'd written. Sitting on the hood of his car, shoes dusted with sand, he pulled out a small notebook from his backpack. He started to write. Slowly. Honestly. No rewrites this time. No perfect phrasing. Just truth. Dash dash dash. You said you didn't know my name. That you've started dreaming in my words. What you don't know is I've been carrying yours. I don't know your face. But I swear I'd know your silence anywhere. I've wanted to reach out more times than I can count. But I was afraid the magic would break the moment I did. Now I think maybe, the real magic is in letting it become something real. I'm scared. I'm selfish. And sometimes I let fear win. But not today. So here it is, raw, messy, and maybe too late. But if you're still out there, still listening, I want you to know. Your words found me too. And I'm still here. Still waiting. Still writing. Yours, almost. He stopped just before signing it with his name. His hand hovered above the line, but then, he left it blank. Not because he wanted to stay hidden. But because maybe. She wasn't ready to know yet. Back in the city, by early evening, Chris walked into the studio and found a new envelope waiting on his desk. No stamp. No label. Just a familiar, clean fold and slanted handwriting, not hers this time. His heart kicked once in his chest. Jackson had written again. Chris smiled faintly, shaking his head as he turned the envelope in his hand. All right, man, he muttered. Let's see what you're ready to say this time. Chapter 32, left unnamed, yet known. Friday came again, quietly. The kind of evening that carried a hush in the air, like even the city didn't want to interrupt. In the radio booth, Chris tapped his fingers against his coffee mug as the opening jingle faded into the low hum of ambient music. He'd held onto the latest letter all week. Letting it breathe, letting it wait. Because some letters weren't just messages, they were moments. And this one, this felt like a turning point. He leaned into the mic, voice softer than usual. Some letters, they ask to be read quietly. Not shouted. Not rushed. Just, listen to. He unfolded the paper slowly, smoothing the creases with care. And began to read. I don't know your name. But I think I've known your heart longer than I should. You said you didn't know mine. That you've started dreaming in my words. What you don't know is I've been carrying yours. I don't know your face. But I swear I'd know your silence anywhere. I've wanted to reach out more times than I can count. But I was afraid the magic would break the moment I did. Now I think maybe, the real magic is in letting it become something real. I'm scared. I'm selfish. And sometimes I let fear win. But not today. So here it is, raw, messy, and maybe too late. But if you're still out there, still listening, I want you to know. Your words found me too. And I'm still here. Still waiting. Still writing. Yours, almost. Across the city, in a quiet corner of her apartment, Hannah sat frozen, mug halfway to her lips, radio casting warm sound through her space. Her chest had gone still. Because she knew. Not guessed. Not assumed. Knew. This wasn't a coincidence. Not anymore. He had heard her. Written back. And this time, he had almost said his name. Almost. She pressed a hand to her chest as her eyes watered, not from sadness, but something else. Something like recognition. The same kind of ache she'd carried now had a mirror. Yours, almost, she whispered to herself. And just like that, something inside her shifted. No more fear. Not if he was reaching too. At the studio, Chris looked up from the letter, lips pressed in a thoughtful line. He didn't say anything for a few seconds. Just let the silence hold it. Then finally, whoever you are, she heard you. And I think you just changed everything. Chapter 33, You're a Lifesaver. Chris frowned at the studio inbox. It wasn't that the letters had stopped, it was that they were getting quieter. It was getting more intimate. Almost like they didn't want to be read out loud anymore. He couldn't explain it, but after the last two letters, something had shifted. As if these two strangers were no longer writing to the show, but simply to themselves. And maybe, it was time to step back. But he just didn't know how to get these two people together when they didn't even want to say their names. Chris was lost in his thoughts when a soft knock broke the silence. Come in, he called, sitting up straighter. The door creaked open and his girlfriend, Jasmine Carter, walked in with a coffee mug in each hand. Her oversized sweater was slipping off one shoulder as she nudged the door shut with her foot. Care for a drink? She asked, offering him a cup. Chris took it gratefully, managing a smile. You're a lifesaver. But Jasmine tilted her head, studying him. Everything okay? You look lost. Just some work stuff, he replied, brushing his lips against the back of her hand. She didn't buy it. Is it about the two strangers? The ones who send those letters? He blinked. How'd you guess? I've been listening, she said softly, curling up on the sofa beside his desk. Those letters, they've changed. I think they're not writing for the audience anymore. They're writing for each other. Chris sighed. Exactly. But I can't just give out their names or emails, I don't have them. And they clearly don't want to be found. Jasmine's eyes lit up with an idea. What about that FM messaging app? The one you told me about last year, FM Notes, right? Where people send messages to each other anonymously through radio station channels. There is a function of private chat too. What if you mentioned it on air? Chris raised an eyebrow. You think they'd actually use it? I don't know, but it won't hurt to try, she said, shrugging her shoulder and taking a sip of her coffee. If they're listening, and I know they are, they'll know it's meant for them. Chris stared at her for a moment, then let out a slow smile. You're a genius, he said, kissing her forehead. I know, she grinned. Now go make your strangers. Chapter 33, FM Notes. Friday night came again, and with it, the usual hum of the radio station. But tonight, something felt different. Chris had decided. It was time. The studio was quieter than usual, the lights dimmed to a soft golden glow. He glanced at the envelope sitting on his desk, the one that had just arrived that morning, one more silent plea, a letter that seemed to hold an entire world within it. He glanced up at the clock. 8 p.m. It was time. The show began, the familiar theme song playing through the speakers as Chris leaned into the mic, his fingers lightly brushing the envelope. The city's lights flickered in the background, but tonight, the room felt heavier with anticipation. This next part of the show is all about connections, Chris's voice echoed smoothly into the microphone. Connections that are fragile, delicate, and sometimes, unspoken. He glanced down at the letter again. He could feel it. The words were no longer meant for public consumption, but for someone specific. Tonight, Chris continued, his voice softening with a touch of mystery, I'm offering you all something a little different. Something more personal. Let's introduce a new way to reach out. If you've ever wanted to speak to someone, send a message without your name attached, this is for you. He paused for a moment, letting the words sink in. He could almost feel the shift in the air. The listeners were hanging on every word. Chris adjusted the mic and leaned forward, his voice softer now, almost like he was speaking directly to two people in a room full of silence. Sometimes, the most important words aren't meant for an audience, he began. They're meant for just one person. He let the silence settle before continuing. Our station's app has a new messaging function. If you want to send a message, one that's just for the person you're thinking of, you can now do so through our new FM Notes app. His fingers tapped against the desk. No names, no pressure, just a private space where you can say what matters most, to the one person who needs to hear it. He paused again, just long enough for hearts to skip a beat. And if you're listening tonight, maybe this message is meant for you. A soft instrumental track faded in, replacing the quiet with a melody that felt like the beginning of something new. He could already picture the waves of curiosity spreading through the audience. And to the two people who've been writing me for the last few weeks, Chris paused and added. The girl without a name. And the boy who is listening. Chris added with a quiet smile, I hope you hear this and know this is for you. He pressed a button, cueing the app's URL and a brief description for anyone who wanted to try it out. And then, just like that, it was out there. No turning back. He smiled to himself, imagining two people sitting in two corners of the city, blinking at their radios in the same stunned silence. The app name echoed softly into the night, FM Notes. Just a nudge. No pressure. The rest was up to them. Chapter 34, A Quiet Hello. Jackson sat in his darkened living room, the only light coming from the soft glow of the floor lamp in the corner and the screen of his phone. He was quite nervous to get his letter today. He hadn't meant to listen tonight. He told himself he wouldn't. It was better to not listen when he had said so much last time. But when Chris's voice came through the speakers, soft and deliberate, Jackson froze. And when he mentioned FM Notes, Jackson sat upright. It felt like the world paused. Like something had shifted, again. His phone buzzed. FM Notes. New app update available. Jackson stared at the notification, unsure of what it meant. He hadn't opened the app since Chris first mentioned it on the radio. But now, something tugged at him, a quiet insistence he couldn't ignore. He tapped the notification. The app opened to a redesigned interface, clean, minimal, with two distinct tabs. Wall, a space to post thoughts, quotes, songs, whatever you felt like sharing. And then, just below it, messages. Private. One-on-one. Just for the person you're thinking of. His thumb hovered for a second before he clicked messages. His heart thudded loud enough that he could hear it over the soft hum of the fridge in the next room. He didn't think. His fingers moved before his doubts could catch up. He created a username. The boy who is listening. The app prompted him to search usernames or enter a handle. His fingers moved again. At the girl with the name. He didn't know if that was what she'd choose. But if she had listened today's episode carefully, she would definitely choose this. He closed his eyes and tapped the search button. No results found. Jackson's heart sank as the search returned no results. He stared at the screen, disbelief flickering through him. No one with that username. He'd been sure. She had to have heard today's episode. She'd know exactly which handle to pick. He leaned back against the couch, thumb hovering over the search field. What if she hadn't downloaded the update yet? Or chose something different? He tapped the back arrow and switched to the wall tab instead. Maybe a public post would catch her eye. He drafted a quick, simple post. The boy who is listening. If you're out there, I just tried to find it, the girl with the name, and came up empty. Maybe you haven't joined yet. Or maybe you chose another name. Either way, I'm here. Still listening. TBTWIL. He paused. This was more public than he intended, but it was still anonymous. Enough to hint at the right person without exposing more than necessary. He tapped post. A soft thud confirmed it. And then he waited. Because sometimes, the first step toward connection wasn't in perfect matching but in making sure the other person knew you were still there. Chapter 35, Comments. Jackson didn't know how long he stared at his phone after hitting post. The screen dimmed. He tapped it back awake. Checked again. No notifications. He sighed in disappointment. He set the phone down, but his eyes kept flicking back to it. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe she. Buzz. His heart jumped. Under his second public post, the one that he just posted. At the boy who is listening. If you're out there, if you heard tonight's broadcast, maybe you'll understand what this means. To the girl without a name, this message is just for you. Comments had started to pour in. At Radio Junkie 88. Is this part of the show? Or is someone catching real feelings here? Eyes. At Midnight Dreamer. I swear if this is who I think it is, I've been shipping them for weeks. Loudly crying, loudly crying, loudly crying. At Late Night Muse. Who's the girl? Is this anonymous love story finally turning real? At Krishofan. If you two end up together, I'm gonna need an exclusive episode. Don't be shy now. At Moonlit Words. This is better than any drama I've ever watched. God, I hope she sees this. At Night Owl 2. Okay, but why am I catching feelings for a message that's not even meant for me? At Sleep Tight. STOPPP. This is the most romantic thing I've seen all year. Someone write a novel about this right now. At Chris Biggest Fan. Chris better be officiating your wedding when this ends. I said what I said. At the _real shipper. I've been invested since letter number 2. Don't play with my heart now. At Coffee with Knockos. Plot twist. They know each other IRL but don't realize it yet. At Lettersandletekels. Imagine the girl reads this, panics, and still doesn't reply. I'd scream. At Midnight Notiadict. Man said, to the girl without a name, like it's poetry and now I wanna cry under the moonlight. At Soft for Strangers. This is how you do soft launching a love story. Take notes, people. At Whisper Sand Wi-Fi. I don't know who either of you are, but I'm rooting for you harder than my own love life. Don't disappoint me. At Curlyfria Sandfields. Can Chris please do a recap of the love story so far? Because some of us joined late and now we are emotionally invested. At fanaccount _948. If you two don't get together, I will start writing fanfiction until you do. Jackson skimmed them, heart pounding. He hadn't thought about the fact that people might be watching. Waiting for their letters. The whole world is buzzing me. Where are you? Then. Buzz. One new notification, private message from, at the girl without a name. Chapter 36, Found You. A tired Hannah returned from work. She entered her room and collapsed onto the bed like a log. Glancing at the clock, she realized the show had already ended. With a sigh, she opened the app to listen to the replay. It was Chris's voice that made her feel ease. Smooth, familiar, calming. But tonight, it was something else. Something changed. Like the whole city was holding its breath. Sometimes, the most important words aren't meant for an audience, Chris said, they're meant for just one person. Hannah's heart skipped. She sat up straight. No names. No pressure. Just a private space where you can say what matters most, to the one person who needs to hear it. He paused again, just long enough for hearts to skip a beat. And if you're listening tonight, maybe this message is meant for you. Her chest tightened. Could this be what she thought it was? And then Chris said it softly, gently, but like a spark igniting everything inside her. And to the two people who've been writing me for the last few weeks, Chris paused and added. The girl without a name. And the boy who is listening. Chris added with a quiet smile, I hope you hear this and know this is for you. Her breath hitched. Her phone was already in her hand before she could talk herself out of it. She downloaded the app with trembling fingers, her heart thudding like a drum. When she opened it, the first thing she saw was a post. A username that made her freeze. At the boy who is listening. If you're out there, if you heard tonight's broadcast, maybe you'll understand what this means. To the girl without a name, this message is just for you. Her vision blurred instantly with tears. It was him. It had always been him. And then the comments started rolling in, one after another. Is this part of the show? Or is someone catching real feelings here? I swear if this is who I think it is, I've been shipping them for weeks. Chris better be officiating your wedding when this ends. I said what I said. If you two don't get together, I will start writing fanfiction until you do. She laughed through the tears, wiping at her eyes. Her fingers hovered over the message icon. Could she really do this? What if she was wrong? But then she remembered his words. To the girl without a name. That was her. And he had waited. She tapped the message button and typed slowly each word from the center of her heart. At the girl without a name. I was afraid to look. I thought, maybe I imagined everything. Maybe I was hallucinating. But tonight. And I knew it was for me. She took a breath and kept going. I don't know how this started nor I know how it will end. I don't even know who you are. But I know how you make me feel. Like someone is out there, holding the thread that's been tying me together this whole time. Like I'm not crazy for hoping. For wanting to be heard. Her thumb hovered above send. One last line. I found you. And, I think I don't want to let go. She hit send. And waited. Chapter 37, Just Us. Jackson stared at his phone, the glow of the screen casting soft light over his dim apartment. The notification stared back at him. One new message at the girl without a name. His breath caught. For a moment, he was afraid to open it, like touching it might break the spell, might make it disappear. But his thumb moved, and the message unfolded like a letter from the universe. At the girl without a name. I was afraid to look. I thought, maybe I imagined everything. Maybe I was hallucinating. But tonight. And I knew it was for me. I don't know how this started nor do I know how it will end. I don't even know who you are. But I know how you make me feel. Like someone is out there, holding the thread that's been tying me together this whole time. Like I'm not crazy for hoping. For wanting to be heard. I found you. And, I think I don't want to let go. He read it once. Twice. A third time. And then he smiled, the kind that came slow and soft and uncontrollable. She'd heard him. She'd understood. He didn't even realize he was typing until the words appeared on the screen. At the boy who is listening. You don't have to let go. I was afraid too. That maybe this connection was all in my head. But I kept writing because something told me you were real. And now, you are. He paused, thinking, then added. I don't know what happens next either. But maybe, we figure it out together. Just you and me. No names. No pressure. Just us. He pressed send and exhaled. The screen didn't buzz again right away. But this time, that was okay. Because she was real. Because the space between them, filled with static and silence for so long, was now humming with possibility. Chapter 38, Just Us Part 2. They didn't exchange names. Not yet. But something had shifted. From that night on, the messages kept flowing, not daily, not forced but naturally. Like breaths in and out. Like checking the sky and knowing someone else was looking up at it too. At the girl without a name. Had the worst day. But I saw a stray cat curling up under a parked car and suddenly, it didn't seem so bad. Does that make sense? At the boy who is listening. More than you think. Sometimes the smallest things keep us anchored. Their chats were quiet corners of their day, no pressure, no expectations. Just soft words that made everything feel a little lighter. In real life, Hannah found herself smiling more at work. Laughing at small things. She brewed tea in the morning with music playing softly, and even her coworkers noticed the subtle change. Someone's glowing lately, Mia teased, nudging her at lunch. Hannah just shrugged, sipping her tea. Must be the moonlight. At night, she'd curl under her blanket, phone in hand, waiting for the little blinking dot to show up on her screen. And when it did, her world warmed. Jackson, on the other hand, felt his music changing. The lyrics came easier. His melodies had more color. He even started sleeping better, no more tossing with unfinished thoughts. No more writing letters that would never be sent. He still hadn't told Chris. Not yet. This was still theirs. Private. Beautiful. His manager noticed. Your mood's different. You okay? Jackson smiled faintly. Better than okay. He'd walk around the city sometimes, headphones in, wondering if she was somewhere close. They didn't know each other's faces, but it didn't matter. She was real. They talked about dreams. At the girl with the name. I want to write something someday. Not for fame. Just something true. At the boy who is listening. Then do it. I'll read every word. They talked about fears. At the boy who is listening. Sometimes I think if you knew who I really was, maybe you'd run. At the girl with the name. Then I'd run straight to you. And they talked about nothing at all, favorite snacks, the songs they looped on sad days, the color of the sky when the city fell asleep. In real life, they carried on. Different streets. Different lives. But with a shared secret thread that made everything feel more alive. Neither of them rushed. Neither pushed for more. Because sometimes, just knowing someone out there really heard you was enough to change everything. Chapter 39, A Breath Away. The city was drenched in silver. It had rained softly all morning, the kind of rain that didn't demand umbrellas, only made you pull your jacket a little tighter and tuck your hands in your pockets. Hannah walked slowly, her boots splashing lightly in the puddles. She'd taken a different route home today, just felt like it. The streets felt quieter in the mist. Calmer. She passed by the old radio station building without meaning to. Her eyes flicked to the side, heart twitching slightly. The red mailbox sat outside the building like it always did. Rain slicked. Familiar. Untouched by time. She paused. There was no letter in her hand this time, but memories tugged at her fingertips anyway. She smiled faintly and whispered to herself, funny how something so small can change everything. Across the street, Jackson stood under the overhang of a small cafe, a takeaway cup warming his hands. He was watching the drizzle, listening to the light hum of traffic and the soft jazz filtering out the cafe window. He didn't notice her at first, not really. Just a girl walking slowly in the rain. But something about the way she lingered by the mailbox, it pulled at something in him. He glanced down at his phone. At the boy who is listening. Rainy days always feel softer when you slow down. Past the mailbox today. Thought of you. Hannah's phone buzzed in her coat pocket. She read the message and froze. Her eyes flicked up, across the street. But the figure standing at the cafe had already turned, walking in the opposite direction. She blinked, shivered, then typed. At the girl with the name. I passed it too. Maybe we walked by each other. The rain makes the world feel more delicate, doesn't it? That night, the conversation drifted again, easy and warm. At the boy who is listening. I have a favorite place in the city. Tiny corner bistro. They serve the best butternut squash ravioli. Hidden gem. Someday you should try it. At the girl with the name. I will. Only if I can recommend dessert. At the boy who is listening. Deal. Let's trade places, food maps of the heart. A few days later, Hannah walked into the bistro he mentioned. The ravioli was exactly as he described, rich, buttery, like comfort on a fork. She ate slowly, looking around at the cozy, golden-lit room, wondering if he'd sat at the same table. Maybe even looked out the same window. As she left, she typed. At the girl with the name. It was perfect. I think I'll come back here again. They still didn't know. Not yet. But they were always a breath away. Chapter 40, Almost. Saturday. Late afternoon. The rain had cleared, leaving the city washed and glowing under a mellow gold light. The kind of light that makes everything look like a memory before it even happens. Hannah had a sudden craving, not for food, but for air. For silence. For somewhere that wasn't her apartment. So she went out, no real destination in mind, just walking. Jackson was already there. That little bookstore cafe tucked near the river. The one with crooked shelves, sleepy music, and soft-spoken baristas who remembered your usual order. He sat near the window, flipping through a book he wasn't really reading, earbuds in, but the music wasn't playing. Just quiet. Just stillness. Until the bell above the door jingled softly. Hannah stepped inside, the scent of cinnamon and ink settling around her like a welcome. She ordered chamomile tea and browsed idly, trailing fingers across spines, stopping at poetry. When she passed the corner table by the window, she paused briefly. Someone sat there, head slightly tilted, dark hair, familiar in a way she couldn't explain. Her breath caught for a heartbeat. She almost looked closer. But the barista called her name, and she turned. Jackson looked up a second later. Just a soft sound, a girl's voice, a name he didn't catch. but her silhouette was already slipping into the other aisle. He watched the space she left behind. Something about it felt like déjà vu. They didn't speak, didn't meet, not yet. But something shifted. Later that night, as the sky turned navy and the streets glowed with yellow street lamps, she messaged. At the girl with the name. I think I was close to you today. I don't know how I know. I just felt it. And his reply came almost instantly. At the boy who is listening. Funny. I had the same feeling. Like I almost turned around and saw someone I'd been missing. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more videos.